Getting wet, I won't go into the great detail, but 91 years ago, Shackleton died in the early morning of the 5th of January, 1922. Just like us yesterday, he'd come up the coast. He apparently had returned to his more cheerful self because he was pointing out all the mountains that he'd crossed and the whole thing. He was a very happy man. They anchored in here and went ashore, met some of the whalers they knew. They said they would celebrate Christmas Day, which has been too rough at sea. They were going to celebrate it here on this day. And Shackleton had a bit of a yarn with Worsley, and they talked about going to treasure hunt in the South Pacific, pearl hunting it was, or pearl diving. They had all kinds of schemes, which was quite nice. He then asked, he couldn't settle down, he couldn't sleep, so he asked Hussey to come, Leonard Hussey, and play on his banjo, the banjo that had been so important to their morale back in the endurance days. So he played him a little music, so he was almost like seeing all his men somehow. And then he called in Macklin and said he wasn't feeling very well. Could he have a sleeping draught, Dr. Macklin, who prepared it for him, but then there was a low whistle and he was feeling much worse. And at 2:45 in the morning, he had a massive heart attack and died very shortly after. His body was taken after the autopsy and after lying in the church where we will be. His body was taken to Montevideo on its way to England. But Shackleton's wife said no, send him back to South Georgia, to the Antarctic where he belongs. So that's what they did. His coffin was brought by 6 Shetland whalers from Leith Harbour. I think they probably felt Scottish people, his own nationality, Celtic people were appropriate. And they lowered the coffin here with his face to the south, unlike all of the other graves that are east-west oriented. Before we just do the toast, we also have to consider Frank Wilde, who is just here, and only here for the last year, whose ashes were discovered, having gone missing. Frank Wilde, his lieutenant, his right-hand man, now lying at his left hand, his ashes interred there as well. So Frank is the greatest of the veterans of Antarctic expeditions, 5 of them. So it's good to remember him as well. But this is a toast to the boss. I'm going to just quickly read what Captain Worsley wrote, one paragraph. This is after the endurance trip. He said, 6 years later, when we were looking at Shackleton's grave and the cairn which we, his comrades, erected to his memory on a windswept hill of South Georgia, I meditated on his great deeds. It seemed to me that among all his achievements and triumphs, great as they were, his one failure was the most glorious. By self-sacrifice and throwing his own life into the balance, he saved every one of his men. Not a life was lost, although at times it had looked unlikely that even one could be saved. For scientific discovery, give me Scott. For speed and efficiency of travel, give me Amundsen. But when all is lost and you are in a hole, get down on your knees and pray for Shackleton. And traditionally we give Shackleton a tot.